I got a question um, that I during the break that I thought I could try to answer while we're together. Um, how can you be a caregiver and support your loved ones in times of crisis or when they're considering suicide? When it is so emotional, um, and they are blaming you for wanting to commit suicide. How do you, as the caregiver, keep your boundaries and provide real support that they need? So there's a couple of things in this question, and really appreciate it. So there's a question providing support during crisis or during a suicide crisis. Uh, what do you say when they're blaming you and making it your fault that they want to die by suicide? And how, as a caregiver, you hold boundaries and provide real support in the moment. Um, Excellent question. I think those are like the crux of why we're all here together today. It is very emotionally draining. So holding boundaries. So I see holding boundaries as a way to take care of ourselves and to take care of the other person. So thinking of boundaries as a tool for further connection, right? You're honoring yourself and your needs. You know, I have lived with folks who have gone through suicidal crisis, and so my first step is taking care of myself and really understanding what is it that I need and how much energy and time do I have to devote to taking care of the person in their crisis. I don't blame the person in crisis, right? The definition of being in crisis means you need help. Your emotional distress, what's going on, your thoughts, um, they're so uncomfortable, they're so painful, you're feeling so much pain, you just need to get out of that pain. So I'm not blaming the person for experiencing their pain. And I don't even blame the person for how they express their pain. Um, so they might say, I'm going to leave you, or I never want to see you again, or you're the reason why I'm going to kill myself. Uh, what I have control over is knowing not to take it personal. So that's one thing that I do internally. I also reflect back to the person um, that we're all responsible for our own lives. In this moment of crisis, I choose to be with you and I choose to take on the responsibility of keeping you safe. Um, and there's a limit to that, right? And so what what my loved one who's gone through suicidal crisis, what we did was we created a plan and a team of people so that we would rotate. So at her worst moments where she could not be safe by herself, then we would rotate, taking turns being in the apartment with them. So sharing the load is also important, not doing all of it by yourself. Um, if the person says like you're the reason why I want to die, or you're the reason why I'm going to kill myself, like I don't take that personal and I don't make any meaning out of that. I think the person is expressing their pain in the best way that they can. So you can reflect back, you know, I hear how much you're hurting and you want me to understand how much you're hurting. And so you're saying that. And ultimately, you know, you're responsible for your life. Um, Yes. Sorry that my answer is so jumbled. I thought I was clear in my mind, but just to like summarize, you know, not taking it personal, sharing the load, so see if you can get other family members or friends to be there for you, um, valuing your own needs and limits, and stating your needs and limits as a way of taking care of yourself and the relationship. Like, I love you so much, right? And I want our relationship to continue. And so I can be a support person. You know, you can call me from 5 to 9 after work, but please don't call me during work. During work times, maybe you can call your mom. So, like, really being clear about your boundaries and your limits and your needs. Um, yeah. And when the person's out of their crisis, um, then like sitting together and working out a practical plan. That's where WRAP, the Wellness Recovery Action Plan, can be really helpful. It's a practical tool that people write for themselves. And part of the WRAP plan is a crisis plan. And so when the person's feeling better or feeling well, then like working together and collaborating and making a plan that works for the both of you. Yeah, appreciate the question. And I hope that, other folks, um, just by show of hands, if you've experienced the same thing of like being stuck, feeling responsible, feeling blamed, those, yeah. So the person who asked the question, you're not alone. Oh, here's a really great response. Thank you so much, Odessa. When my loved one was suicidal and blaming me, I tried to remember that he trusted me enough to be angry with me as opposed to expressing his anger towards others. So it's so hard not to personalize, but when we are in our ancient brains, in crisis, lashing out is not really personal. To me, it always felt desperate coming from his pain. Thank you for that perspective. Yeah. Alrighty. I have a few more slides. Let's see. I wanted to continue the path of the be the one. So we covered ask, and then there's a few more to cover. So keep them safe is the next one. So keeping them safe includes knowing their thoughts. That's why we do have to ask directly if they have a suicide plan, if they have access to the means. And then what we can do as a support person is to make the environment safe. Like literally shelter in place at home, when we're struggling with these suicidal thoughts. So here are a handful of questions that you should memorize. And this can help you determine, what level of danger the person is, the loved one is at. And then when the person's in crisis, then we work to make the environment safe, make home safe. So they can have their emotions, the person can have their intense thoughts and feelings, right? Work through their crisis, but the home is safe because there's no weapons around. So with medication, this is the literal lockbox that we use in our family. Um, Medications are locked. Sometimes we keep them in the car. Some of my staff and volunteers live with ongoing suicidal thoughts and feelings, and they've asked if they can keep their medicine here at the office for support. And so, yes, for a temporary time while we're in that crisis moment, keep the medication somewhere safe. Guns, putting a lock on the gun or keeping the gun somewhere at a different house. Um, Oftentimes when it comes to gun safety, right, people who are really attached to their guns, um, we have to be really clear that we're not here to take your gun away, right? It's part of gun safety is how we frame it. And most people who own firearms follow gun safety rules. And so this is part of it. While you're in crisis and you're not feeling well, you might be having these crazy thoughts or urges. Let's give the gun to a neighbor or to a friend's house. Now keep the bullets. Let me hold on to the bullets. And then when you're feeling better, you get your guns back. Um, so it's not about taking guns away. It's really about staying safe when we're in crisis. Same with sharp objects, knives and such. Keep them in the trunk of the car or somewhere different. Um, and then, yeah, I imagine, you know, people here in the workshop have experienced other suicide means. I'm curious. I want to open it up to everyone. What have you done to keep your environment safe for you and for your loved ones? You can put in the chat and I'll read it out loud. rope is a common suicide means. So I did talk to a caller who had rope, and she did not have very many loved ones close by. And so she threw the rope into the dumpster, knowing that it'd be too gross to try to retrieve. So the goal with mean safety is to try to create as many steps in between the person in crisis and accessing that means, that weapon. Alrighty, I'll move on. Assessing is really about knowing how to help ride out the storm together. This is the main goal of using these tools. There's the storm, you're in crisis, you're having emotional pain, you feel out of control in your body, you feel out of control in your, with your emotions and thoughts. That's okay. We'll write it out together. You're not alone when you're in that crisis. I have to ask you these assessment questions so that we can understand, the level of danger you're in, and we can make a plan to match. Oh, I see someone dropped in the chat, Odessa, that we bought a locking file cabinet for household sharps like knives, a meds lockbox, um, and then you had to really lock all objects that were sharp in any way, like pencils or pens. So that's very valid too. Um, yeah, things that we might not consider a weapon, like a pencil or a pen, can become something that can be used for self harm. So, and this is where like you include the person, right? Asking your loved one, what are the things that come up? What are the urges like? What are the thoughts and feelings that come up when you're in the suicidal crisis? And let's work together to gather these things so that our home can be safe during the crisis. Here's the chart for you and your loved one to use to determine if it's low, medium, or high or severe suicide risk. And the bullet points kind of give you a sense of what would medium risk look like, right? So let's look at medium risk where there's some suicidal thoughts, there might be a vague plan, limited access to means, and our loved one is willing to engage in self-care and other supportive activities. So that might be a medium risk. And so some of the things to do to take care of ourselves, engage in coping skills, connecting with other people, let your care team know. So either both professional care team like your psychiatrist or therapist, as well as your loved ones, um, know that the thoughts are getting more frequent or more intense, because we want to catch the crisis before it even turns into a crisis, right? Um, using the safety plan is these are helpful interventions. And as the intensity, frequency of the suicidal thoughts and feelings, the urges increases, and our ability to cope decreases, then it moves into the high or severe suicide risk. And that's when we don't let the person be alone, make the environment safe. And we might seek crisis or emergency services um, if there's a severe suicide risk. So I hope this is helpful in kind of laying out, this is what I'm seeing, and this is the plan or the start of a plan. Here are a list of crisis referrals. I'd be happy to come back and provide another presentation on the different crisis referrals. Alameda County is working hard to create more services during crisis, mental health crisis, so that we're not utilizing law enforcement. And here's some of those examples. Unfortunately, many of these resources are in Oakland. And if you live out in the Tri-Valley area, that's a long drive. And yeah, I support you in advocating with your local board of supervisor and your local governments to um, build out some of these resources closer to home. Okay, so the next step is be there. So be physically present, emotionally available, and spend quality time. So sometimes when we're having crisis, we might want to talk about the crisis, but oftentimes people want to be distracted from their crisis thoughts. And so doing things together, doing things that help you feel connected, doing things that are fun, um, might be the better way to go, as opposed to talking about your problems or their problems. So help build a safety net for our loved ones. So that includes connecting to the crisis line of crisis resources, connecting to the community, joining those RAP groups, developing a safety plan together. And if you don't know about Wellness and Recovery Action Plan, I recommend that you learn a little bit more. I put links throughout the PowerPoint presentation so you can learn more. A safety plan, this is kind of what a safety plan looks like. Um, a lot of the clinics in Alameda County use a safety plan to help create. It, it's a written down document that's written in the person's own handwriting. Um, and it's a prioritized list of things to do when I start to feel unwell or when I start to feel unsafe. So step one, what are my warning signs? Step two, what are things that I can do on my own? Step three, who are people or social settings where I don't have to be alone, but I could be around others. And maybe we don't talk about my problems, but we do something fun together. Step four are people who I can reach out for help. And that's when it's a higher level crisis. And so I do want to talk about my problems. Step five is professional help. Step six is making the environment stay safe. So what are the steps that I need to do to make our environment safe? And step seven, what is the one thing that is most important to me and worth living for? This was designed by the VA system to support veterans manage their suicidality. And it works very well for all people, from young people to older folks, adults. Um, what's great is that it's written in the person's own words. There's a sample made by Dr. Rudd. So very similar, but this is more based on CBT. And so folks in the room who might have a therapist who likes to practice CBT, this might work well. And there's an app for everything, including making a suicide safe plan. And so I want you to have access to that. And the last structure system of the be the one to is to be the one to follow up. So continually to check in. And there's a link here for you to read more about both the research and the steps. And here's some tips if I'm having suicidal thoughts or feelings for yourself. I want people to know that I believe that suicidal thoughts and feelings are a natural part of being human. We live in a very stressful and difficult world, and it doesn't mean that there's something wrong with you, right? That we live in a painful world. There's something wrong with our society that leads us to want to kill ourselves. So I never blame the person who is feeling suicidal. It makes sense. And I ask that you reach out for help. You're not alone. Okay. So I have about 20 more minutes. Um, so I wanted to just like briefly touch on some suicide prevention theory and practices. And I want to approach this topic very carefully and with caution. When something is scary like suicide, one way to cope is to like be very intellectual about it. And so I encourage folks in the workshop to stay with their feelings. Suicide is a scary topic. That sense of responsibility and the fear of losing someone is very real. Um, but know that we're here together as a community, right? You're literally not alone. We're here together, and thanks to Zoom, we can be together from different parts of our community. So I'm going to share some theories that inform suicide prevention work. But ultimately, what's most important to me is the individual's experience and the experience that the family is going through. So I'll work to connect the theories to everyday experiences. And I invite you to share too. If you say something in the chat, then I can read it out loud to everyone. There is a strong correlation between trauma and suicide attempts and suicide death. And I imagine many of the folks here know about the ACE studies um, and the impact of trauma on overall health, not just mental health, but other kinds of health, physical health. Um, so according to a recent 2017 article, individuals who reported 6 or more ACEs had a 24 times increased odds of attempting suicide. Oops, sorry. So there's a real link between childhood trauma and suicidal experiences. And I want to share this because people who are experiencing suicidal experiences, it's not your fault. There's a lot of things that might have happened in your life to lead you to where you are today. Um, and it's not your fault, and you have the responsibility of taking care of yourself too. Um, I know it's unfair. This is Edwin Schneidman. He's founded uh, the word suicidology. He was in Los Angeles in the 1950s and started the first suicide research center. And he created this term called psych ache. It's an ache of the mind. So psychological pain is was like one of the first people to really capture that into words, psychological pain. And in his own words, and you can hear his voice, um, if I were to commit suicide, it would be in terms of my frustrated needs. And if you were my helper, I would want you to think of me in terms of what needs were bugging me. And so, as caregivers and helpers, if someone's saying that they're feeling suicidal, try to understand what needs are bugging you. What do you need right now? Do you need support? Do you need time together? Do you need alone time? Do you need peace and quiet? Do you need respite from your day to day grind? What needs is bugging you right now, and how can I support you in getting your needs met? Um, Fast forward to 2005, Thomas Joyner writes a book called Why People Die by Suicide. He's a researcher at the University of Florida. His dad died by suicide, and he dedicated his life to try to understand why his dad died. Um, and he came up with the interpersonal theory of suicide. And the theory says that when someone experiences thwarted belongingness, I am extremely alone. I am alone. As well as perceived burdensomeness, I am a burden on others. Then we call that desire for suicide. And most people on earth have experienced these experiences at least some point in your life, right? That I feel very alone, or I feel like I'm a burden on others. And it's when you have this third section, the capability for suicide, I am not afraid to die. So that can look like people who use substances, or people who work in the military or work as law enforcement agents who have seen death. So they lose the fear of death because it's something that they experience regularly. When you have all three uh, experiences at the same time, that's when we're going to see that a suicide attempt. And so suicide deaths are still rare, um, and they happen. I like this theory a lot because it gives us hope and some tools um, to help someone who's feeling suicidal. You just try to walk them out of one of these circles, right? If someone's feeling, I'm feeling extremely alone, right? The fact that you're there and you're in physically connected or emotionally connected, You're helping them feel less alone. So you are reducing their suicide feelings. Or if they're feeling like they're a burden, asking questions like, well, help me understand. Why do you feel like a burden? Has anyone said that you feel like a burden? What would you do if I came to you and I was needing support, right? What would you say to me? Reminding the person that they have value, they have meaning, that they're meaningful to you is a way to reduce that sense of feeling like a burden. And then capability for suicide, we talked about making the environment safe and so we can walk the person out of one of these circles, then you will be reducing their suicidal urges. You will be reducing their feelings of loneliness and burdens to others. There's a newer theory that came out in 2015 to explain why people die by suicide. Um, and it jumps off. It's like what's the word? An evolution from Thomas Joiner's theory that and it simplifies the theory to three major steps. One is that suicide ideation occurs as a reaction to feelings of psychological pain and hopelessness. So they really focus in on that psychological pain and hopelessness. And two, they emphasize that connection, feeling connected, is a key protective factor against suicidal ideation that gets worse. So if you can help someone feel more connected, more like they belong, more like they're connected to you. And the theorist, uh, it's not just like connected to people, but connection to their community, connection to their job, a project, a role, maybe an interest or a hobby. If they can get a sense of purpose or a sense of meaning, then that can help the person feel more invested in living. So it's really helping the person see their connection to life. And then this is similar to Thomas Joiner's theory is that when someone has some suicidal ideation, it's a capability. So either their emotional needs or they have practical capability, like they have access to weapons or access to other means. Um, as capability increases, then the suicidal ideation will also increase. So here we work to reduce their capability or access to means. And so those are some theories, but I like to go back to this New York Times article from 2019, I think. The empty promise of suicide prevention. The suicide prevention has been a field since the 1950s, but people's suicide rates are still increasing, like Mark had shared earlier. Um, so we're not something else. We're missing a key factor. Um, what is that key factor? You're welcome to read this, but I can share that I believe that suicide prevention is more of a social justice issue. As a social worker, I believe in the person in the environment theory, um, that our ability to take care of ourselves, our ability to get our needs met is directly impacted by our environment. And so we know we don't have enough mental health services. We know COVID-19 has drastically changed the way we live and has impacted some communities, like communities of color, more highly, more deaths than other communities. We know that people don't have access to food or fair housing. Gay people did not have the right to marry for so many years. And it's these social causes that create someone, that lead someone to feel like they don't belong, like they don't matter. And I believe that the key to suicide prevention is really thinking about it in the uh, social justice lens. And on the NAMI blog, I found an article called Suicide Prevention as a Social Justice Issue. So here are key things that we can do as community members, right, to support our loved ones who are feeling suicidal, as well as our community. So really advocating at a systemic advocating for systemic change to support people who are marginalized. And if you think about a person who's struggling with their mental health diagnosis, on top of that, they have to struggle with racism or sexism or other harms that are done in our society based on how they look or what group membership they belong to. I can see that very quickly someone can feel so isolated and so alone in this world. I have a caller that I talk to regularly who has shared, right, that this world was not made for me. And I agree with her. Every day she experiences people telling her, that you don't belong through microaggressions or not being able to find a therapist in a timely manner. All those experiences make us feel more and more alone. And so if we can show up for each other, give voice to each other, help each other feel heard and seen, work with our local governments to get more funding for more resources. I think that kind of advocacy work goes a long way. And ultimately, what these theories tell us to do is what we want to do is help people feel seen, feel heard, and feel like they belong. So I have a question for the group. What helps you feel heard and helps you feel seen and helps you feel like you belong? Dancing for me, literally being with, a community of people and doing something fun together. Doug shared family and love. Heather shared that people know me and ask about me and care about me. That's so real. What else? What else do you do to show that other people, what do you do to show the people in your lives that you care about them? Being present and active in their lives. Thank you, Doug. Checking in with folks, being curious without judgment. Thank you. Including people. If there's something that you love, including people in your hobbies, inviting people to do things with you. Mm-hmm. Exactly. We live in a world that is so we're so harsh on ourselves, right? Like if you ever had like a performance review, right? And your boss tells you one like four things that are positive and one thing that is negative, you walk away remembering the negative thing. Um, we judge ourselves so harshly. And if we can give each other the gift of affirmations, that, that would be so lovely to combat the internal voices that we have. Preparing meals and activities, sharing jokes, spending time together. Yeah. The fact that you all showed up today on a Saturday to be in community, that is right helping us feel like we belong. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and care, asking people how you're doing, and like really taking the time to like hear their answer. So I do believe we all have the skills and the tools to create a community where we can take care of each other. And I'm seeing it today. Sharing and laughter together. Yeah. So I'm going to move forward just to show you that there are some more resources. There's a slide deck that I put together um, of the various crisis resources that are available in Alameda County. You'll have a link in the PowerPoint presentation, but it's a different PowerPoint presentation that describes think about being in crisis on a continuum where there's prevention and the person might, if we're talking about suicide crisis, the person might have suicidal thoughts and feelings, but there's no plan, no means. But as they get more access to plan and access to means and more intent on dying by suicide, then we go into more crisis mode. And then after the crisis, then there's post-crisis follow-up. Um, the resources that I share in this PowerPoint presentation falls along this continuum. So when you're trying to find the right resource for your loved one, think about where they're at in that continuum and try to match the resource. The things to consider also is location, age, insurance, and the specific situation that the person's going through. And as you go through the slides, you'll see pictures of the resources. And here, this is a crisis service and the level of care, so in pink. And you can see pictures of what it looks like on the inside. So you're welcome to review this for yourself. You're welcome to share this as well. The mobile crisis team, Amber House. I think I'm going to wind down the presentation with a reminder to take care of ourselves. We talked a little bit earlier about caregiver burnout and like holding that emotional intensity for a long period of time is not sustainable. Shelley has a question about the resources. Can we use the services if we don't live in Alameda County? The short answer is no, because they are funded by Alameda County. But if you tell me where you live, we can connect via email and I can point you in the right direction of finding out what the resources are closer to where you live. Yes. Going back to taking care of yourself, I urge you all to take time for yourself. Prioritize your needs and your wants. I want to be part of your support system. So if you have questions or concerns, or you wanted additional support on how to support your loved one, you're welcome to email or call me.
And Ben, I can't thank you enough. So I'll leave it at that and just say really appreciate your time coming in and giving this information and we'll never tire of it and we'll see you next time.
Yes,
Right? Right.
yes.
Okay.
I appreciate everyone. I look forward to seeing everyone in person too. Hopefully
Yes.
we'll be able to be together.
I will catch up with you later. I have some things to share with you. So that now I know how to get a hold of you too. So, okay, thank you. We're going to have a personal story from Jeff Kiola. And actually, I need to pull this up because I really want to talk about, yeah. So Jeff is 17 years in recovery. He provides crisis intervention training presentations, speaking at the Wright Institute at Berkeley Mental Health to an audience of licensed clinical social workers and marriage family therapists, interns. Also, the NAMI family to family class at the Family Education Resource Center. I'm going to assume that is at the Oakland Center. That he's on the board of directors for the Berkeley Bipolar Support Group, a speaker for NAMI East Bay's family to family classes, and Contra Costa College undergraduate nursing students. And he administers for online support group, the families affected by mental illness through Facebook, and is a consumer speaker to family advocates for the Family Education Resource Center. In 2016, Jeff received City of Berkeley Mental Health Consumer Advocates of the Year award from the Family Education Resource Center for 7 years of service doing the crisis intervention training. And then today, we are privileged to have Jeff speak about his personal story with suicide.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Jeff Kiola. First thing I want to do is let you know I'm 71 years old, and the reason I'm mentioning my age is because I did not get my diagnosis until I was 54. I flew under the radar until that point. I have bipolar disorder 2, and it was manifested in hypomania, racing thoughts, pressured speech, but I was very high functioning. I worked steadily for 35 years. The thing about having a diagnosis is you might not ever be diagnosed unless it interferes with your daily life. Doesn't mean you don't have challenges. It just means you have tools that are allowing you to still get by. I never got fired from a job. I never got kicked out of an apartment. I never got in trouble with the law. Hi, Brian. And I am really grateful for that because my insight was not very good when I was younger. I grew up on the East Coast, did okay in school, started having trouble focusing starting around junior high, which is when I look back on it now is probably when my hypomania started impacting me. Went to school for 3 semesters in college and then moved out to the West Coast at 19. I didn't know a soul out here. It's the way I wanted it. I wanted to start a new life and build it from the ground up. And I did, partly because one of my traits is I am fiercely independent and self sufficient. I'll get back to that later on because while that helped me build a great life, it almost eventually cost me my life. I never experienced depression until I was 54. Before that, I just needed a way to burn off my excess energy. For those of you who understand about hypomania, I was fortunate I never had a manic episode. So again, I flew under everybody's radar. But I would constantly keep myself active when I was not working. That was my very healthy way of coping with that excess of energy. But I was still not able to slow down my racing thoughts. And while that can help you be accomplished, it also gets in the way of self-reflection. I didn't have any way to modulate either my speech or my thoughts. They just poured out, unregulated, unmonitored, and got to be, I didn't realize at the time, it got to be pretty unpleasant to the people who had to listen to it and couldn't get away from it, like in the workplace. Socially, not so bad. Workplace could cause problems. Well, at 54, I lost my job. And my whole life, I've been sought after by employers because when you're hypomanic, you show up almost every single day to work on time, ready to go, doing your own job, helping other people doing their jobs because you need a place to channel all that excess energy. And if you can do it in healthy ways instead of self destructive ways, it's really pretty good. It works really well. My life was very comfortable. I traveled a lot, had enjoyable activities outside of work. Um, I didn't resort to substances to try and manage. I didn't self medicate in that regard. So I was lucky that I didn't compound problems by doing that. And finally, at 54, there was a perfect storm. I lost my job. I've been living paycheck to paycheck. And I lost my last bit of social structure when I got laid off from my job. So it was everything converged at the same time. It was more of a situational depression than a chronic or clinical one, but it still was a bad one. For 4 months, I sent out job applications. I did not get a single response. What that does to somebody's self-esteem who's used to being snatched up by employers, I can't begin to tell you. I had always been confident throughout my life, always been sought after, and I always felt I had value. That's really critical when we're talking about depression and suicide. Everybody needs to feel valued. I didn't feel like I had anything of value to offer anymore because I didn't get a single response to any of my applications. I thought maybe I no longer had marketable job skills. I thought I was too old. I thought I don't like computers. How am I ever going to catch up and stay caught up and fit in? And by isolating, I just made things worse. Remember, I mentioned about how one of my traits is being fiercely independent and self sufficient? Well, while that helped me tremendously in building my own life out here, starting at age 19, the exact same trait almost cost me my life because what I would not do was reach out for help when I was depressed. I didn't even realize I was depressed because it was a new experience for me. Now, after 4 months of getting no response, feeling invisible, and liking myself a little bit less each day, which is really hard, I spent the next 2 months planning my suicide. And it was intentional, it was calculated, it was well thought out as a suicide can be when we are talking about a depressed brain, because a depressed brain, as my mom explained to me, does not work like a regular brain. I have to say, my mom is my trifecta. She grew up with a mother with schizoaffective disorder. She worked for over 30 years in psychiatric nursing, long after I had moved out to the West Coast. But she knows what she's talking about. And she's my mom. You can't get three better things rolled into one phone call. So I was extremely lucky in that regard. You will hear me use the word lucky repeatedly, and people think that's odd given my situation where I have a mental illness and I've had a suicide attempt and I'm living in the mental health care system. But I am lucky because after my failed suicide attempt that took me to John George for a 72-hour hold, and I came away with the right diagnosis the first time, the right medication the first time, and a mom who was able to be my Sherpa, who was able to help me navigate the mental health care system, which most people don't have that. They have a case manager if they're lucky. They get to see them once a month. The case manager is just meeting them for the first time in their life, not at one of their better times in their life. So I was, again, extremely lucky. All the pieces were there. I came to the table with tools. I knew what wellness looked like. And I was able to start getting my life back on track. And the first thing I did was, after talking to my therapist, after talking to my psychiatrist, he gave me my diagnosis and I immediately said, okay, what do I do? Because at age 54, denial is not really much of an option. You've already been beating your head against the wall. And I was relieved when I got my diagnosis because things started making more sense. And now I knew what I was up against and I knew what I had to try and work on. So I asked him point blank, I said, what do I do now? He said three things. Number one, he said, you learn about your diagnosis because it can be managed. Number two, you take the meds I find for you the way I tell you to take them. And number three, you need to get 8 hours of regular sleep because good sleep hygiene is critical. He said, if you don't do the third one, the first two aren't really going to matter much. And he's been right. And I've been able, because I was able to get decent subsidized housing and have a good living situation, and my meds did stabilize me pretty quickly, to be able to get, head out on the right path in my recovery, not make many missteps, not have many relapses, not having any major relapses. It's just been steady progress, sometimes slower than other times, but that's not important because it's not a race. It's a marathon. And so you have to just keep putting one foot in front of the other, as they say. Um, Now, my suicide attempt was going to be as considerate as I can make it because I didn't want anybody else to suffer because of my choice. I thought it out carefully. I got rid of my belongings discreetly. I told all my friends I was going to move back east to take care of my mom, which was all very plausible. My mom has lupus. She was by that time in her 70s. And so it all sounded believable. And then I got on the ferry in the evening and I got off by Yerba Buena Island. I was going to swim to the shallows and just wait for hypothermia. Well, somebody heard me go over the side and they turned the ferry around and came back and hauled me out. That's what landed me in John George, which when you talk about 5150s, everybody is always saying there's no such a thing as a good 5150. Well, they're never pleasant, but there are good ones in the sense that it saves my life and saves other people's lives because that's where they need to be at that point. So I came out and got into transitional housing, eventually was in Bonita House. I've been here 15 years now. It's a dual diagnosed program. Uh, Housing is crucial to the foundation of your wellness. You need sanctuary so you can feel safe, process things, recharge your batteries. The work I've been doing for 17 years, both on myself and working within the community, I could not still be doing. I would have burned out by now if I did not have a place to come where I could count that there would be no drama. Trying to live within the mental health community in a situation with other people with diagnoses and not have any drama is unheard of. I'm extremely lucky. There's that word again. I'm very lucky that things have gone the way they have. Now, I've put in the work, but my meds needed to work. Meds are tools, meds don't make us well. We need to figure out how to work on our wellness. But if you can't be mindful and self aware and have the insight, you're spinning your wheels. It's hard to get any traction, it's hard to make any progress, and it wears you out. I've been so fortunate not to have to go through that. But I've facilitated over 3,000 groups and listed more than 20,000 shares in the last 17 years. And I know how lucky I am just by virtue of hearing what other people go through and how much they struggle. I see other people put in 1,000% more effort than I put in and not meet with nearly the success I meet with. So again, I am lucky. There's no question I'm lucky. As far as the mental health, my diagnosis, like I said, is one that's manageable. Not everybody can manage their symptoms as easily as I can mine. Some people can't do it through medication. It's a difficult thing to do day in and day out. It wears you out, but you really don't get to take many breaks. And I want to talk about medications. Medications are a trade off. I've put on 110 pounds since I started taking my meds. I now have diabetes and sleep apnea, but I have insulin for my diabetes and I have a CPAP machine for my sleep apnea. And those are two trade offs I am more than happy to make for my stability. The hard part is for people whose meds don't help them get stable and also give them bad side effects. That's a lot tougher to stay on their meds. When I do the crisis intervention training with law enforcement, one of the things I try and emphasize is they often go out on calls where they find themselves saying, why don't these people just stay on their meds? Well, there's no just about it. There's 20 reasons I can give them why we don't want to stay on our meds. And just, a few major ones. And then I explain to them how would they feel if they had been prescribed something for migraines that didn't get rid of the migraines but gave them ulcers. Would they continue to take it? That's a pretty much of a no-brainer. It's a lot harder when it comes to mental health and psychiatric medications because they are so varied. They work well for some people and not for others. So one med works great for one person and it has terrible side effects for someone else. Some meds stop working for no apparent reason and you feel a bit cheated. Now you feel a lot cheated because you've made all the compromises they told you to make and you've followed all the rules they told you need to follow, and your meds may work for a while, and all of a sudden one day they just stop working. You can get desperate, you can despair, you can feel like you're throwing your hands up and saying, what's the point? But I am fortunate that I only had that one depression, but that one depression almost cost me my life. Uh, After I got on the right medications, was able to slow my brain down, was able to focus, was able to work on my diagnosis and know how to try and manage stress. Did a RAP plan, like Ben was talking about earlier. All those things were steps that I took in my wellness. Um, I am in a situation where I have one roommate. We get along great, 15 years now, which is almost unheard of. My housing situation is the foundation for my wellness. And we also earlier talked about hope in the previous presenters talk. When when you lose your hope, you need somebody in your life who can hold your hope for you until you can take it back. And my mom was that person for me. Uh, Again, lucky. Not everybody has somebody like that, where and when they give you advice uh, later on in your recovery, we all need someone who can tell us the hard things that we need to hear but don't want to hear. Uh, Denial wants to creep in. It's exhausting to work one's recovery, but it's yours to work, and if you don't, you will probably regret it. You will regret it. That's the hand you were dealt. Accept the hand you were dealt. Don't keep bluffing and telling people you have a full house when what you have is a pair of deuces. Be honest, play your pair of deuces as well as you can play them. And if you're sincere in your efforts, people will stay around and continue to support you. Not all, other people have their plates full in their lives too. But again, I was lucky to have a mom who could be there for me. And then I started building my own support system within the mental health community. Part of the way I did that was by giving back. I got trained as a peer support specialist. I worked 5 years at that job. I like doing what I do now much more because I don't have to do the documentation part of it. I don't have to keep regular hours, and I don't have to worry about stepping on people's toes or upsetting people. I now am the contact person for the bipolar support group. I don't do the facilitations while we're doing Zoom. They're not something that work well for me. I'm glad we still have them so we can be connected. And I am at this point a warm line for resources and people who are just looking for Zoom links for us and other resources for themselves. And I know a couple of you who are in attendance today. We've already spoken through those particular channels. I'm glad to see you here today. And my contact information will be provided, so you can all reach out to me anytime you want after this workshop is over. I like what I do. I'm retired. I have the time. I choose to spend my time doing this, supporting the mental health community, being an advocate for consumers, and reaching out. Now, the thing about the suicide is like I told you how I ended up there. I never saw it coming. Nobody did. Uh, Again, self worth, self esteem, feeling like you have something to offer. What helped me was when I was in bipolar support group one night and I gave somebody feedback and they looked me in the eye and said, "Thanks, that really helped." That's what turned things around for me. For the first time in months, I felt valued. I felt like I did have something to offer. Before that, I was still not sure. I was no longer suicidal, but I didn't have any direction. I didn't have a meaning and purpose. And my diagnosis has turned out to be a silver lining in my life. I know it's very rare because I've heard so many other stories, but what I have now that I never had before was I am more at peace with myself. I'm more comfortable in my own skin. And for the first time in my life, I have a meaning and purpose. also important. I know the previous speaker touched on that as well. Um, and I have a quote that I like to read from time to time is, I don't want to be a great leader. I want to be a man who goes around with a little oil can, and when he sees a breakdown, offers his help. To me, the man who does that is greater than any holy man. The mechanic with the oil can, that is my ideal in life. And I am very fortunate. Again, I'm very lucky that I found this niche for myself. Better late than never. My life looks very different than it used to look, but it looks a lot better. I'm better than Humpty Dumpty. I did put all the pieces back together again, and I may not be a jumbo egg anymore. Keeping in mind, I might not have ever been a jumbo egg. That might have been my grandiosity and my hypomania speaking. But I maybe I'm a medium egg, but the important thing is it works. I have a life that works for me. COVID's been very trying because it took away a lot of my tools. But what I still have been able to hold on to is this connection to the community by being somebody they can reach out to. Uh, I can feel like I'm still valued. I can still feel like I'm making a difference. And that's what keeps me going. And that's what gets me up every day. That there's probably somebody who's going to be emailing me or messaging me or leaving a phone call who's looking for help or resources or just an ear. System is overwhelmed, as we know. I can spend an hour on the phone if that's what they need, and I'm glad to do it. And it helps them help themselves. I don't come in there like a clinician and pretend I can fix things because I can't. All I can do is support and encourage, and I do that. And I think most of the people who are speaking with me and connecting with me are appreciative. They seem to always say they are. They keep me in the loop. I'm very grateful for that. Um, Something else about changing your life around and rebuilding a different life is something called recognizing you might have a lower ceiling. It's hard to accept that people who've been high functioning might not be as high functioning anymore or accomplish as much anymore as they used to be able to do. But it's something you have to come to terms with. Otherwise, you're setting the bar a little too high and you might keep failing and setting yourself up for failure. It's not recommended. It's not a good way to go. Um, when you when you have to accept your new life, there's another quote I keep handy. It says, sometimes you have to let go of the picture that you thought your life would be like and learn to find joy in the life that you are living today. Um, a lot of acceptance, a lot of humility, a lot of gratitude need to be there. And for me, that wasn't easy. I didn't have much of any of those things growing up, mostly with privilege and a very high functioning life. So it was sobering, but I'm better off for it. Um, Again, that's why I'm more at peace with myself. Um, and I want to say one thing too about my mom, having her in my corner. When I got the award from Berkeley 4 or 5 years back, I told her about it. I was glad to get it, but as a mom, she was over the moon because you know how moms are. It's like being proud of their son and having worked in the same field, she truly understood on many levels what that meant. And she wrote in my birthday card, she said, I'm so proud. I'm so proud of you, not just for your recent accolades, but for your strength and determination at every step along the way. Never a step back in pain, disappointment, or just plain exhaustion. You're amazing. Love, Mom. Now, when you have somebody, excuse me, when you have somebody like that in your corner, it's much easier to succeed. So remember, to be there even when your loved one isn't aware. They may see you as the enemy. They may see you as somebody they can't trust, that's their illness talking. It's not truly how they feel. Uh, but if you hang in there and you stay there and be there for them, then you might be surprised when they come out the other side that they were aware of how much you've been there for them. They just weren't able to say it at the time. I know that was true for 35 years. My mom kept trying to encourage me to get help. I was resistant to it because I had lacked the insight. I did not understand what I was going through. I thought my life was working fine because of the blinders I had on. But the amazing thing is, she always felt that everything that she said was going in one ear and out the other. And once I got my diagnosis, I was able to tell her that nothing she ever said, nothing ever went in one ear and out the other, because I always considered the source. So she passed away about 1.5 years ago, but as long as I get to keep doing this kind of work, she's always with me, because all I'm doing is channeling her. And I don't really miss her for that reason. She is with me, and I get to carry on her legacy. Um, I feel so fortunate to get to do what I do. And I have healthy boundaries. I have a good sanctuary to decompress, recharge my batteries, process things. That's why it's 17 years and counting. I'm not even close to burning out. I'm getting stronger. So I'm grateful for all that. And I'm more than happy to answer any questions you might have. If you want to send them in chat, I will try and read them. My eyesight's not good, but if we have time to do it verbally, um, I'm open to that too. So that's my story. And, hang in there with your loved ones. Recognize that a lot of times their behavior, it puzzles us, let alone puzzling you. We don't know what we're doing a lot of the time or why we're doing it. So we can't expect you to, and you shouldn't expect yourself to. If you don't have a diagnosis, it doesn't, you can be compassionate, but you can't really be empathetic. There's a difference. Brene Brown's video about empathy is great. As mentioned earlier today, I recommend everybody view it. It's so spot on, and it's used by NAMI, I know, in their family-to-family classes, and we've used it in our presentations, Mark and I have. So yeah, it's a wonderful video. So I recommend it highly. Very brief, very concise, very to the point. Very effective. So if anybody, I couldn't read what the chat box said a minute ago, but
Jeff,
yes,
this is Marcia. Would you like me to put your contact information in the chat box?
sure, please do.
And at least there'd be a way to connect.
And also
on
Facebook, if they want to, just Jeffrey Kiola. I'm the only one listed on Facebook that I'm aware of. So if they want to, message me on Facebook, whatever medium they feel most comfortable in, I'm happy to do.
Okay, thank you so much. You lend such a depth that we all need to hear in your personal experience, and I'm so grateful for you being here today. Thank you.
You're welcome. My pleasure, as always.
And your information now is out on the chat to anyone who wishes to contact you directly.
Great. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much.